Imagine gas prices are hovering at uncomfortable highs, your household budget is stretched to the absolute limit, and, when you finally walk into your local car dealership looking for a break, they proudly present their newest offering. And it is a 777 horsepower monster truck that gets single-digit gas mileage. I mean, welcome to the massive, almost comical disconnect to finding the automotive world. I'm your host, and welcome to Auto News Talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It really is just this fascinating, kind of a wild collision of realities out there.
It really is.
You have consumers desperately trying to tighten their belts, automakers completely doubling down on extreme luxury and performance, and then, the dealerships are just stuck right in the middle. They're just trying to figure out how to keep their doors open when the manufacturer's vision totally does not match the customer's wallet.
Exactly, which is exactly the terrain we're walking through for this segment of Auto News Talk. We're going to map out the widening gap between what you, the driver, actually need and what the industry is obsessed with building. We're also going to explore the terrifying hidden risks of modern vehicle manufacturing. And finally, we'll look at the incredibly specific, sometimes unglamorous playbooks that smart businesses are using to adapt to all this chaos.
Right, and to really understand the sheer scale of this chaos, I mean, we can't start at the factory. We have to start where the money actually originates, right? The buyer's wallet.
Yeah.
And we need to look at how that is dictating the wholesale market.
Oh, I'm glad you brought up wholesale because we have some really fascinating data from Cox Automotive on wholesale used vehicle values. And, for anyone listening who isn't living and breathing dealership operations every day, the wholesale lanes are essentially the behind-the-scenes auctions. It's where dealers buy inventory from each other.
Yeah, exactly.
So if dealers are suddenly overpaying for specific types of cars at auction, it's a direct reflection of what you, the consumer, are demanding on the lot.
Yeah, that's exactly how to look at it.
Yeah.
And the Cox wholesale data shows that traditional seasonal buying patterns they're broken. Affordability and operating costs are fundamentally reshaping the entire market.
Right.
Like, while overall wholesale values are actually firming up and resisting the depreciation we normally see, that strength is not across the board. It is hyper-concentrated in two very specific categories: older vehicles and EVs.
Right. And meanwhile, the data shows SUVs are really softening. Buyers are actively avoiding anything high-priced or fuel-thirsty. But the EV data is what genuinely surprised me.
No, totally.
According to the Cox reporting, EVs are actually outperforming conventional gas vehicles in the wholesale lanes. Prices for 3-year-old EVs have outpaced comparable non-EVs for 6 consecutive weeks. I mean, they are sitting at an 11% increase versus the start of the year.
Which is wild, but it tells us consumers are making these highly calculated, pragmatic choices. They're looking at EVs not necessarily as like a luxury tech statement anymore, but as a pure math equation. They just want to save on long-term fuel and operating costs.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that affordability spectrum, there's intense demand for vehicles that are 8+ years old.
It completely reminds me of the real estate market. People can't afford the brand new starter homes anymore, so they're forced to either buy like a 100-year-old fixer-upper, or they move into some hyper-efficient, experimental tiny home just to slash their utility bills.
That is a great analogy. The traditional middle of the market is completely hollowing out. If you're a buyer, you're either going green to save money over time, or you're going incredibly old just to afford the monthly payment on a reliable ride.
Yeah, I do wonder, though, how long this EV strength in the wholesale market can actually last. I mean, we have this massive looming wave of EV lease maturities coming down the pipeline.
Oh, yeah, the wave is coming.
When all those 3-year leases end and those cars just flood the auctions, does buyer familiarity hold up those prices, or do we see a total collapse in EV wholesale value because of oversupply?
That is the big unknown, right? It's hanging over the secondary market.
Yeah.
But the immediate, undeniable signal from the consumer is a rapid retreat to affordability, which makes the behavior on the manufacturing side of the industry feel like it's happening on like a completely different planet.
Seriously, because if you read that Cox data, you would just naturally assume every automaker on Earth is furiously pivoting to build cheap, highly efficient commuter cars. But Stellantis, well, specifically the Ram brand, is taking a totally different approach. They are launching the Rumblebee line of massive, high-margin gasoline muscle trucks.
It sounds completely counterintuitive to everything we just discussed. Gas prices are high, SUVs are softening at wholesale, and Ram's answer is a performance truck. But, I mean, you have to view this through the lens of corporate survival. Stellantis posted a staggering 22.3 billion euro net loss last year. The CEO is under immense pressure to map a path back to profitability.
But wait, how does a gas-guzzling supertruck solve a 22 billion euro hole when consumers are literally demanding cheap commuter cars? Are they just looking at the wholesale data and tossing it in the shredder to chase rich enthusiasts?
Oh no, they aren't ignoring the data.
Yeah.
They're kind of circumventing it through a classic Halo product strategy. These Rumblebee models aren't meant to be volume sellers. The flagship SRT Hellcat variant they're teasing is targeting an absurd 777 horsepower.
That's just crazy.
And a 170-mile-per-hour top speed using a 6.2-liter supercharged Hemi V8.
170-mile-per-hour full-size pickup. That is actually terrifying.
It is extreme engineering for sure, but the point is to drive massive showroom traffic. They want you to come in, drool over the 707 horsepower monster, and then, sign a lease on a standard, sensible V6 Ram 1500. It lifts the entire brand's prestige. Plus, these performance trims yield margins that are roughly 3 times higher than their average vehicles.
Wait, 3 times the profit margin? Okay, well, that starts to make the madness look like an actual business plan.
Exactly, and they are controlling their production costs by using shared platforms. They essentially take a standard truck frame and mostly just swap in the performance hardware. This is hitting the market precisely as the full-size pickup segment splinters into these hyper-specific luxury and performance niches.
Interesting.
Automakers are essentially relying on low-volume, ultra-expensive, extreme vehicles to subsidize the losses on the rest of their lineup and keep investors excited.
I'm still a little skeptical, though. I mean, we don't have the final horsepower certifications yet. They haven't released the exact fuel economy figures. And most importantly, we don't know the final sticker price. They are teasing this mechanical monster, but until we know what it costs to buy and to fill up at the pump, it's hard to say if the halo effect will actually work this time around.
That's a fair point. But it undeniably proves that automakers are willing to push the absolute limits of performance engineering to chase outsized margins.
True. But pushing engineering to those absolute limits introduces a whole new category of risk, doesn't it? When you build complex, highly stressed machines at scale, the margin for error effectively drops to zero. And we're seeing the catastrophic results of that with another story, the Toyota Tundra recall.
Oh, man. This is such a revealing look into the fragility of modern manufacturing.
Yeah.
I mean, even for a brand historically synonymous with bulletproof reliability, complexity is taking a massive toll. Toyota has been forced to significantly expand a recall on the Tundra's 3.4-liter twin-turbo V6 engine.
And usually, when I hear about an engine recall, I assume it's a bad design, like a gasket that blows out after 50,000 miles or something. But this isn't a design flaw, is it? It's literally a microscopic manufacturing error.
Precisely. Microscopic machining debris was left inside these engines during the manufacturing process. They just expanded this recall to include about 44,000 more 2024 Tundras, which pushes the total number of affected vehicles to over 250,000.
Over 250,000 trucks with debris inside the engine. So what actually happens mechanically? If I'm driving one of these trucks, what does this debris do?
It destroys the engine's main bearings, specifically what's called the number 1 main bearing.
Okay.
To put it simply, your engine's crankshaft spins at thousands of revolutions per minute, and it doesn't actually touch the metal of the engine block. It glides on a microscopic film of oil inside these bearings.
Okay. So if you introduce metal shavings into that equation, what happens?
The debris gets trapped, it restricts the oil flow, and suddenly you have bare metal grinding against bare metal at high speed. The engine basically tears itself apart. It can lead to a sudden, complete loss of power while you're driving down the highway, or a total no-start condition.
It's terrifying, because I'm picturing this massive, heavy-duty truck, and it's brought to its knees by, basically, dust. It's like leaving a single grain of sand inside a luxury Swiss watch. The tighter the precision, the faster the machine destroys itself from the inside out.
That is the perfect analogy. And what makes this so difficult for Toyota is that they knew about the issue. Even engines that were built later, under tightened, highly scrutinized cleaning protocols, they still suffered from residual debris.
Wow. So they couldn't just wash the engines better?
Exactly. They eventually had to implement a physical hardware change. They had to design an updated number 1 main bearing that was more resilient against any remaining particles.
Which naturally raises the question of containment. We know about these newly added 2024 Tundras, but are the specific build dates for the safe ones totally finalized? And will this sweeping recall eventually catch other models, beyond the Tundra and the Lexus LX that share these manufacturing lines?
Yeah, that's the nightmare scenario for an automaker. When tolerances are this tight, A microscopic oversight literally snowballs into a 250,000 vehicle disaster.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the landscape we've just painted here. You have consumers who are financially tapped out, desperately buying 8-year-old cars. You have automakers like Ram gambling on 777 horsepower margin chasers. And you have manufacturers like Toyota dealing with 250,000 vehicle recalls over microscopic debris. If you are a local car dealer caught in the middle of all of this, how do you even survive?
You survive through ruthless, unglamorous operational discipline. While the automakers are chasing halo trucks, the smartest dealers are turning automotive problems into retail profits. And we can actually see this in Playbook from DL Automotive Group. They've scaled to a $1 billion 24-store empire, and they didn't do it by chasing shiny objects.
Right. I was reading about their acquisition strategy. It's fascinating. If they look at a highline exotic luxury franchise and the math doesn't hit their strict 5-year ROI hurdle, they just walk away. They heavily prefer volume brands where the numbers make sense. But the really wild part is how heavily they focus on collision centers.
Yes. This is where retail strategy meets reality. When vehicles are getting incredibly complex and expensive to fix, fixing them becomes your most reliable revenue stream. Look at Deal's turnaround case study. Instead of buying a clean, pretty dealership at a massive premium, they bought an underperforming collision center that was bleeding $28,000 a month.
Why buy a broken body shop, though? That just seems like a massive headache.
Because of what they could build it into.
Yeah.
They invested $4.5 million to completely rebuild and modernize it. By doing so, they turned it into a massive profit center that directly feeds parts sales and reconditioning work back to the main dealer group.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it creates an internal revenue loop. The manufacturer's fragile, easily damaged vehicle becomes the dealer's financial safety net.
That makes total sense. You keep the money inside the family, essentially. And I was really struck by how they handle the actual dealerships they buy. They selectively integrate. Like, if they buy a store with a great local culture, they don't fire everyone and slap their name on the wall. They might only change the DMS, the dealer management system software, to match their corporate tracking, but they leave the people alone.
Because they recognize that processes are what need managing, not necessarily personalities. You actually see this in how their CEO handles escalations. When a customer complaint reaches her desk, she doesn't just issue a polite apology. She literally pulls the repair orders, the physical ROs from the service drive, just to establish the cold, hard facts. She finds the root process that broke, and she fixes it.
It's an incredible level of discipline, but realistically, how long can you sustain that? The CEO herself noted that their aggressive growth is directly constrained by their current director's bandwidth to oversee these stores. You can't just clone a meticulous leadership team. At some point, human bandwidth caps your billion-dollar empire.
Absolutely. Human discipline has a hard limit, which leads us perfectly into the digital side of survival. Physical discipline in the service drive is crucial, but in the modern digital market, discipline is essentially worthless if you don't have speed.
Ah, yes. The concept of the quiet tax on dealerships. This comes from another analysis we have on delayed marketing insights, and it basically argues that managing modern retail chaos requires acting on data before it expires.
Right. It's a profound shift in how businesses need to view information. The core insight there is that the value of optimization data decays incredibly rapidly. Like, if your marketing campaign is underperforming, waiting 3 days to act on that insight means the highest impact window for saving your ad spend has already permanently closed.
And what's interesting is the instinct for most dealerships is, oh, we need to hire more data analysts. But adding more bodies doesn't fix the problem. The structural issue is what they call the insight gap.
Exactly. The insight gap is the literal distance in time between when data is compiled and ready and when a human being actually makes a decision based on it. The analysis outlines a strict value decay curve. The absolute optimal time to act on data is the real time zone, which is measured in minutes, or the tactical window measured in hours.
But if you wait a day or two because a report has to sit on a manager's desk waiting for approval, you enter the decision point. This is where value actively leaks out of your business. And if a week goes by before you tweak that digital ad spend, you are in the diminished zone. You are no longer optimizing, you are just reacting to history.
The diagnostic test they offer for a dealer is brutal, but so accurate. If a performance issue surfaced in your metrics, and more than 1 day passed before someone acted on it, the value decay curve has already eroded your money.
It's like getting an emergency weather alert on your phone for a tornado that hit your neighborhood yesterday. The data is 100% factually accurate, but because of the delay, it is absolutely useless for keeping your house safe.
That is exactly the dynamic. Dealerships must treat digital data like highly perishable goods. The speed of your action is just as critical as the accuracy of your information.
So how do they close that inset gap without just staring at screens 24/7?
You automate the plumbing. You implement API data collection, which is basically a digital bridge that allows your inventory software to talk instantly and directly to your advertising platforms like Facebook or Google without a human manually moving spreadsheets around.
Right,
You
right.
script cross-platform reconciliation so the math is done instantly. You let the machines gather and organize the data, but you reserve human judgment for the contextual decisions, like deciding to shift the overall budget or swap out the creative imagery.
I see the value in that. But honestly, how does a small single-point dealership actually do this? They don't have massive IT budgets. They don't have in-house developers to build custom APIs. It sounds like a great strategy for a massive tech-forward group, but a massive hurdle for the average dealer.
That's a very real limitation. The technology gap between large groups and single-point stores is widening fast. But the underlying principle applies regardless of your budget. A delay in action is a direct tax on your revenue.
So we've covered a massive amount of ground here. From buyers scraping together cash for 8-year-old cars, to automakers chasing 777 horsepower margins, microscopic engine debris, billion-dollar collision centers, and the rapid decay of marketing data. How do we synthesize all of this into a coherent picture of the industry?
Well, if we pull back and look at the whole ecosystem, three distinct themes emerge. First, there's an aggressive pursuit of outsized margins. We see this clearly with Ram building extreme halo trucks to lift their brand profitability, and we see it with Deal Automotive turning around heavily losing collision centers to build a billion-dollar empire.
And the second theme.
The unforgiving cost of inefficiency. Whether it's microscopic machining debris destroying a Toyota engine and triggering a 250,000 vehicle recall, or a one-day delay in marketing data quietly burning a dealer's digital ad budget. The modern market violently penalizes inefficiency.
And the third theme brings us back to the start, right? Consumer pragmatism versus automotive fantasy. The Cox data proves buyers are retreating to affordable used cars and EVs just to survive, while automakers are designing ultra-luxury muscle trucks.
Which naturally creates some massive tensions.
Yeah.
Specifically, two main contradictions stand out. First, you have the macro versus the micro. The macro environment, shown in the Cox data, highlights consumers fleeing high operating costs. But that directly contradicts Ram's micro bet on launching massive, thirsty V8 performance trucks.
It's like the automakers and the consumers are reading two completely different economic survival guides.
Exactly. And the second tension is manufacturing versus retail. The Toyota Tundra recall proves how incredibly fragile and risky modern vehicles are to build. But Deal's operational playbook proves that fixing those incredibly fragile vehicles is one of the most lucrative retail strategies a dealer can deploy. The manufacturer's biggest liability becomes the dealer's greatest asset.
So, if you're navigating this industry, what is the practical takeaway?
Speed and discipline are the ultimate shields against chaos. Whether it's a dealership CEO pulling physical repair orders to fact-find and fix a broken customer service process, or a marketing manager using APIs to automate ad adjustments in the real-time zone. Minimizing the gap between discovering a problem and acting on it is the only true competitive advantage left.
In an industry where consumers are counting their pennies and automakers are chasing horsepower, the real winners are the ones who can fix a broken process, whether that's a digital ad campaign or a twin-turbo engine, faster than the competition.
It's entirely about closing that gap.
Thank you for joining us for this segment of Auto News Talk. As you look at your own business, keep an eye on that value decay curve. Ask yourself, what is one decision you can automate to move from simply reacting to history to actually shaping your outcome?
Because if you wait for the perfect data, the market has already left you behind.
Exactly. And the next time you look at a highly complex system, remember that single grain of sand in the Swiss watch. Sometimes the smallest unseen friction is exactly what's tearing the whole machine apart. We'll see you next time on Auto.